right, thanks everyone. I hope everyone had a great lunch and are ready for the second half of our summit this afternoon. We are preparing to start for our third panel this afternoon, which is on high energy lithium-ion batteries. The third panel is moderated by Katie Greenwood, Director of Risk Assessment Bureau, HC. Hazards associated with high energy density batteries are common to all three jurisdictions. This panel will address how risks to consumers can be reduced and what steps have already been taken by stakeholders in North America. Points of focus include the industry's product safety processes pre- and post-market, understanding and eliminating failure modes, and challenges in how can stakeholders and regulators work together to improve safety. So our panelists this afternoon are Charlie Monahan, Director, Regulatory Compliance, Panasonic; Don Mays, Chief Safety and Quality Officer from Samsung; and Rick Brenner, President, Product Safety Advisors, LLC.
Good afternoon. Really privileged to be here this afternoon with my three distinguished panelists. I have to say it's been absolutely fantastic organizing this panel with these three and listening to them on the phone, their wealth of experience on lithium-ion batteries. I have learned a lot in the last several weeks, so I'm not going to take a lot of time in opening remarks, but I think their presentations are very interesting and I really want to get into them. But preventing harm is sort of the core of what we do as regulators and as industry and working in the product safety area. It's the core of what we do, and it's the heart of why we go to work every day. As a regulator, we find it incredibly difficult to keep up with the changing landscape in product safety, and more the products we're regulating do have lithium-ion batteries in them, so it's becoming more in tune with the changes in the technology and making sure that we are aware of the product hazards associated with these. Given the versatility of the lithium-ion batteries, we've all seen the videos on YouTube of products failing rather spectacularly, and sometimes less spectacularly as well. These incidents come into us as regulators, and we then have to assess the risks. We test the products in our labs, and we work with industry to find solutions. So how can we design safer products, manufacture safer batteries, and protect our consumers? What is the role of standards in ensuring battery safety? So I'm going to turn it over quite quickly to the first panelist, Charles Monahan, as you know, Director of Regulatory Compliance at Panasonic, who's well known in the industry for his knowledge and investment in battery safety and sustainability. So Charlie.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I've been asked to put together a little not knowing what everybody's background is in regard to batteries, I've been asked to put together a little bit of Battery 101, so please put up with me for the first few minutes. A single cell is the building block for battery packs. Every single cell has an anode, a cathode, a separator, and other components, hopefully safety components. Single cells are put together into battery packs. This here is a cordless tool pack, and you'll see that there's 5 cells. So when you see your pad or your notebook or your phone, each of them inside these battery packs are made up of individual cells. When you wire cells together in series, you increase the voltage. When you wire them together in parallel, you increase the capacity. Battery packs usually have cells in both series and parallel to make the voltage you need and the capacity you need. Also, hopefully, your battery pack also has a battery management unit. The battery management unit is that intelligence on the circuit board that controls overcharge, over-discharge, counts cycles, things like that. It's ways to help with the safety of the battery pack. You have cylindrical batteries where it's wound material. You've got prismatic where you basically take a wound cell and you flatten it into a prismatic shape. And then the last one, you have polymer cells. And a polymer cell is not built in a round format. It's built like a deck of cards. You put an anode cathode separator, and you wire them together. And they can come in absolutely any shape. And all of the a lot of the new consumer products that are super, super thin are the polymer cells. Any battery is no stronger than its weakest cell, and no cell is stronger than its weakest component. It's very important that when you build cells, the cell manufacturers build out of the top-rate components and also build them extremely well, and I'll touch on that later on. Everybody talks about lithium-ion. There's actually 6 different types of lithium-ion chemistries. You've got the lithium, nickel, cobalt, aluminum. This is the one found like in the Tesla. You've got lithium cobalt oxide. This is the original battery that Sony produced back in 1990. It's now like in the Apple iPhone and stuff. You've got lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt oxide, and then you've got iron phosphate, lithium manganese oxide, and then lithium titanate. And again, each of these have a different, they're all called lithium-ion batteries, but they have different anode, different cathode materials, and they're in a battery pack. You can't mix them together, or you shouldn't mix them together from a safety point of view. And just a fact, the 18650, which a lot of people have heard the name of, is 18 millimeters wide, 65 long. This particular cell comes in all 6 chemistries. Why is the lithium-ion battery different from past rechargeable batteries? All of the batteries in the past, the lead acid, the NiCad, the nickel metal hydride, the 3 rechargeable chemistries before lithium-ion, were all aqueous-based. They were all water-based electrolyte. The lithium-ion is the first rechargeable battery that is flammable. The solvents inside the electrolyte is flammable. On top of that, the energy density, both from a volumetric and weight basis, is much higher than past chemistries. So again, we have a lot of energy in a very small area mixed with a flammable electrolyte. And that's basically, in a nutshell, what is different between a lithium-ion than all the other rechargeables that came before. Okay. I have to thank Bosch. This is probably the simplest picture I could find on the web for how a battery works. Again, every battery has a cathode, every battery has an anode, and every battery has a separator. The cathodes are made of some type of lithium metal oxide, and again, it varies 6 different ways. Most of the anodes are graphite, carbon, some type of carbon graphite. Some of the companies are also now mixing in small amounts of silicon. But again, there's problems with that. It's a great material if we can get it to work, but silicon swells up during the cycling. And so at this point, we're working out technically how to get more and more of it mixed into the anode. The separator is the material which separates the anode and the cathode. Separators are now down to about 20 microns in thickness. Give you an idea, a human hair is between 17 and 180 microns, so it's a very, very thin material. This is the material that allows ions to pass between the anode and the cathode. In addition, every battery has a current collectors. You have a cathode current collector, which is made of copper foil, and you have an anode copper collector, which is made of aluminum. These current collectors are about 1.5 microns in thickness. These are extremely thin in a first-tier, high-end lithium-ion battery. How do batteries work? During the charge, the lithium ions move from the cathode, which is the positive electrode, to the anode, where they are stored. This is where they attract then electrons because of their charge. they receive they receive these from an external power source. Plug it in the wall, and that power came from someplace, wind, solar, coal, someplace, and that's how the battery is charged. During discharge, the electrons migrate back toward the anode, from the anode to the cathode. During this migration, this is where we force the electrons to go through the product that is powering. This is where the energy comes from during the discharge site. Again, what's different between primary batteries and rechargeable batteries is that the chemical process of charging and discharging can be repeated in a rechargeable battery. In a primary battery, it's a metal reduction reaction, and once it's done, it's done. It can't be reversed. Rechargeable batteries, it can be reversed. Again, this is showing a typical cylindrical battery. Again, it's got a cathode, it's got an anode, it's got a separator, and it's got a collector plate in there, both on the anode and the cathode. Also, a well-built cell, at least from Panasonic's point of view, well-built cells, and companies like Panasonic, Sanyo, Samsung, LG, etc. We also put safety devices in each one of our cells. We put in PTCs. These are positive temperature coefficient thermistors. This is a device that raises resistance inside. When resistance increases due to temperature, it goes up to whatever set level that we set as a specification. Once the resistance gets high enough to a point, it will start reducing the current. When it gets to whatever size, at whatever level we specify for that particular cell, it will totally cut off the current for that cell. This is a one-time device. Once it trips, it doesn't get reset. Another thing that first-tier manufacturers do on every cell is we put in CIDs, or current interrupter devices. These are bimetal devices that deform in such a way that will cut off current if it gets above, if the gas pressure built up inside the cell from the high current gets above a certain level. And again, this is not mandated, when you build cells, but the first-tier manufacturers wouldn't put a cell into the marketplace. We don't think you should without a PTC and a CID at the cell level. And obviously not everybody does this. Thermal runaway. This is what a lot of people hear the third term. Thermal runaway is when the internal cell reaction generates more heat than the cell can dissipate. This is just a definition from the IEEE 16 and 1725. Cells should only fail if they are either abused or poorly manufactured. The fact is there's many ways to either abuse a cell or poorly manufacture a cell. Some examples of abuse: external heating. External heating can damage either the separator or the cathode. Overcharge can result in lithium plating inside the cell. Lithium plating will cause dendrites that could pierce the separator. Also, overcharge can result in electrolyte decomposition that would lead to gas generation. Over discharge, again, could lead to lithium plating, again, causing dendrites that could pierce the separator, that again, and all of these could cause internal shorts. High current charging, heat generation, and excess oxygen generation inside the cell. Any structural damage to the cell that results in something being damaged, even one of the safety circuits inside, or just the cell itself. External short circuits. External short circuits can cause heat generation. These are all examples of abuse that could happen to a cell. Examples of poor manufacturing, metal contamination. We're talking at the micron level. extremely small, not even visible to the human eye, metal amounts of metal. So our factories, you walk into one of these state-of-the-art factories, people are walking around, basically you've seen them like the Intel commercials in the bunny suits. This is how state-of-the-art lithium-ion factories are run these days, and not everybody in the world's factories are like that. Having any type of damaged or misplaced insulation material inside the cell, either at missing it or not putting it in the right place, or having the insulation of the wrong type or quality, or just worn through during the cycling. There's lots of ways that insulation can be damaged over time. Any irregular application of active material, any type of rip or tear or wrinkle, we're talking 1.5 micron thick materials, and they have to be laid down and wrapped up perfectly. Plate slitting, make sure when you slit your plates there's no burrs or imperfections. I mean, there's lots of steps in the process that could go horribly wrong from a quality point of view, because the materials you're working with are very, very fine. Again, the idea is to get as much active material as you can inside the cell. Poor welding, where a connector, internal connector inside a battery pack could fail, or even a weld inside the cell could fail. This is why we do extensive testing on vibration and shock to make sure that whatever we're building inside the cell is robust enough. Any of these going wrong could lead to thermal runaway, and again, thermal runaway is a heat buildup. Heat buildup leads to separator breakdown. Any type of separator breakdown could lead to internal short circuiting. Also, heat buildup could lead to electrolyte breakdown. That would also build up flammable internal gases. Any type of breakdown could also lead to any type of internal short circuiting. Again, anything that would lead somehow inside the cell, the negative and the positive touching, would generate a hotspot. That hotspot would cause pressure. The pressure would cause heat, and the battery would ultimately vent. Systems approach to safety. To assure safe products, what the cell manufacturers and the battery manufacturers recommend is that throughout the life of the cell, that the cell be maintained in a safe zone of voltage, current, and temperature its entire life. While short excursions outside the cell's spec range are allowed, those excursions also have specifications. How much it can be outside and how long they can be. Microburst outside a range is okay, but again, everything has to be within spec. The cell is the power source, the little chemical factory that contains the flammable electrolyte. The next level is the battery pack. The battery pack, and again, the cell contains safety features. The battery pack is the next level. The battery pack communicates with the cell and the host device. The battery pack also should contain a battery management unit that again controls overcharge, over discharge, items like this, current, temperature, counting cycles. There's lots of different things that the battery management unit should be looking at. You've got the host device, whatever the piece of equipment is, that needs to actively communicate with the battery pack and the charger and the power supply. You've got the power supply that converts AC to DC. Again, this should be conditioning the power and also communicating with the other devices. You've got the end user. The end user has, again, all these different circles have a responsibility to help protect the cell throughout its lifetime. The next one is the end user. The end user has the responsibility. If the product gives you a warning, adhere to it. And the last thing, all of this is sitting in an environment. Obviously, the environment, while we roughly know what the environment is, there's limits to how hot and how cold and what you should do to your equipment, your battery pack, and your cell. Again, to assure a safe cell, and i.e. then a safe battery over its life, you need a systems approach to safety. Everything should be working together. When you buy a piece of equipment, the charger, the cell, the battery should be sold as a unit. The people who designed that should have all worked together and communicated with each other to make sure they're selling or building a safe system. And all of this is aimed at protecting the cell over its life so you can't have an incident. Let's see. The last thing I can say about batteries is you've all seen in the last few years a lot of batteries, a lot of batteries. I read something the other day that between 2015 and 2020, the world's capacity of lithium-ion will triple. I can assure you that after 2020, the forecast that we're seeing is only straight up. If you think there's a lot of batteries out there now, the amount of gigafactories like the one Panasonic is building currently out in Nevada, there's plans for many, many of those all over the world, and the number of cells and batteries are only going to increase. Nobody wants to give up the portability of having their laptops and their cell phones and their pads. So it's up to all of us to make sure that we get this right so we can continue to use batteries in the long run. Thank you.
That'll work. Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Katie, for organizing this panel. Appreciate it. It's really hard to have a robust discussion about lithium-ion battery safety without being reminded of the Samsung Galaxy Note 7 smartphone recall from 2016. I'd like to discuss some of the safety assurance and process improvements we've made since that time. Today, I'd also like to share with you my perspectives on the advantages and pitfalls of analyzing incident data related to battery safety, plus the importance of ensuring the authenticity of branded lithium-ion batteries and associated accessories. Now, while I've only been at Samsung for a few short months, I know that Samsung's commitment to safety goes beyond our own products. We recognize that our past challenges with lithium-ion battery safety can benefit all of those in the industry if we openly share our lessons learned. Now, you may remember that shortly after the Galaxy Note 7 was introduced in August of 2016, we received reports of certain issues, specifically overheating incidents with some of our devices. We quickly initiated a recall program in cooperation with government agencies and our wireless and retail partners. This recall program allowed customers to exchange their original Note 7 for a device using what Samsung thought at the time to be a safe alternative battery. Now, soon afterwards, however, further reports of issues led us to a second recall, which included the replacement of the devices that we'd previously made available to consumers. Ultimately, we made the decision to halt Note 7 production and sales. Now, in response to this crisis, we undertook two critical missions. First, get the phones back from our customers, and second, to get to the bottom of the problem. So let's start with the recall. We moved quickly to notify our consumers that they should stop using and return their devices immediately. And it's fair to say that we adopted a stance of over-communication. We offered a variety of innovative options for returns and compensation, so a bounty per se, to encourage customers to return their devices promptly. Of course, we did the things that are typical of recalls, such as point-of-sale posters and email messages and toll-free numbers and even a dedicated website. But Samsung also had the unique advantage of being able to directly communicate with the customers because the device itself became the communication tool to reach them. More than 23 million text messages and push notifications were sent to Note 7 customers on the device itself, alerting them of the recall program. We also worked with our wireless partners to push firmware updates to limit battery capacity, to make the devices less convenient to use. Initially, we reduced battery capacity by 60%, and then finally to 0% so the customers would return their phones. The result was 97% of the Note 7s were retrieved globally, 99% in the US, a rate that experts tell us is unprecedented, at least for any product that is sold in the millions of units. Now, at the same time that we were working to retrieve as many of the devices as possible, we were also working with government officials and experts from 3 respected independent testing and forensic laboratories to determine what caused the issue and how to prevent those issues from occurring again. Now, our extensive root cause investigation examined every aspect of the Note 7 device and took several months to complete, involved 700 engineers. It wasn't simple. Ultimately, what we found were 2 separate issues involving lithium-ion batteries provided by 2 different suppliers. The initial recall was prompted by incidents with a device containing the first supplier's batteries. The recall was expanded when incidents were identified with devices containing batteries from a second battery supplier. The investigation determined that in the case of supplier A, the battery problem was one of a defective design, and in the case of supplier B, it was a faulty weld, what Charlie had mentioned, during production. Now, together, it was an unforeseeable combination of circumstances. Now, even though the 2 Note 7 battery devices met industry standards and certification requirements, and we've had appropriate processes in place from a safety and quality assurance standpoint, these Note 7 batteries, Note 7 phones, failed in practice. We realized at that time that we had to innovate beyond industry standards, not only in product, but also in process. That's why we moved forward with a number of concrete actions to raise the bar for our safety and quality assurance processes. We started by building a large-scale test facility where we could replicate the incidents and complete a detailed analysis. We then implemented a new 8-point battery safety check, which adds significant quality checks to each step in the manufacturing process, including at the component level, inline production, and post-production tests. The new process is one of enhancing testing on an increased number of samples, including these steps. More durability testing, including overcharging tests, nail puncture tests, extreme temperature tests, visual inspection on every battery against enhanced acceptability criteria. X-ray testing for any abnormalities. Charging and discharging tests for 100 cycles. A volatile organic compounds test to ensure there is no leaking electrolyte. A disassembly test to assess overall quality and product integrity. Testing under foreseeable use and misuse conditions to simulate what a consumer would do. And finally, an open current voltage change test throughout the manufacturing process. So in addition to these extensive checks on batteries, we also instituted a new quality assurance process to cover every phase of the battery and the device development. Now, these multi-layer safety measures are intended to help identify and address any potential safety vulnerabilities. They extend beyond current industry standards and also beyond the root causes we identified with the Note 7 to address potential future safety risks. Now, some examples of the measures and how we apply to our new products is number 1 is improved safety standards for the materials and the design of the battery. In the device hardware, new requirements including structural elements to further protect the device, for example, if it's dropped. And in device software, improved algorithms that control battery charging temperature, current, and duration. The same sort of safeguards that Charlie was mentioning. We believe we've left no stone unturned from our investigation to our blueprint for an industry-leading safety and quality assurance process that goes beyond current industry standards in order to avoid a recurrence of a Note 7 type situation, unlikely as it may be. Now, in addition to process improvements I just mentioned, we've also enhanced our data analytics capabilities to quickly detect emerging safety and quality defects. Advanced or big data analytics can provide early warning signals that allow companies to get on top of problems quickly before they become a crisis. Advanced analytics pulls structured data from internal sources such as customer service or warranty databases and marries it with external, unstructured data sources such as social media postings or e-commerce customer reviews. Using tools for web scraping and voice-to-text translation and displaying analyzed information on a visual dashboard, one can easily spot emerging issues. Analyzing historical data can indicate quality creep that might otherwise get unnoticed by, let's say, someone who traditionally relies on spreadsheets to analyze their data. But advanced analytics is not necessarily the panacea for identifying lithium-ion battery safety problems. Social media is often full of exaggerated or fraudulent safety claims. The same goes for customer reviews on e-commerce sites, which are sometimes written by paid reviewers who don't actually purchase the products they review. We've seen cases where unscrupulous consumers placed mobile phones in a microwave oven and then claimed a safety defect. News media sometimes reports these incidents without knowing all the facts. Now, my point here is that information citing safety defects should be verified before action is taken. Speaking about fraudulent claims, we've also seen a rise in fraudulent testing. We all know about the Dieselgate scandal, vehicle emission scandal, and you may have heard about the Japanese steel and aluminum suppliers who falsified test data on the quality of their materials. Auditing testing operations is an often forgotten and neglected part of the internal audit process. Yet, when testing is so important to ensure the safety of lithium-ion batteries, it's important to make sure that test data is valid. It's not only a matter of verifying the data itself, but also ensuring that the testing has been done by a qualified laboratory using trained staff that follow appropriate test protocols with calibrated test equipment. There's a lot to consider and worry about. Another instance in which product safety can be jeopardized is during the repair service. Unauthorized repair centers may not be using OEM parts. Replacement batteries in particular can be substandard and unsafe. They may not fit exactly or be compatible with the product in which they're being installed. The same goes for accessories such as chargers and cables. Now, that's why we strongly recommend that battery replacement service be conducted by authorized repair shops, by technicians that have the training, the tools, and the diagnostic capabilities to get it right and make sure it's safe. Counterfeiting is also a concern. The global counterfeit market is projected to reach $1.9 trillion 4 years from now. E-commerce provides the perfect venue for distributing counterfeit products such as lithium-ion batteries. Now, there are various levels of counterfeiting. There are trade dress infringements involving making the product look with the same colors, the same fonts, packaging, but perhaps with a slightly different name in an attempt to fool the consumer. Knockoffs go one step further. They try to make the product look virtually identical to the real McCoy. Sometimes counterfeit products are made at the same factory as the genuine product, but might use substandard components or materials, or use weak quality assurance standards. I call this backroom manufacturing. In addition to counterfeit products, there are also counterfeit safety certifications. UL has a special group just dedicated to stop unauthorized use of their UL listed mark. Now, today, it's important for companies to develop strategies, anti-counterfeiting strategies, to protect their brands. Supply chain security is the first step. Traceability with blockchain technology can help detect and prevent diversions. There are also ways of placing unique markers on products and its packaging, such as electronic inks or crystal taggants, to make it easy to determine authenticity. Web scraping analytics can be used to detect the sale of counterfeit products on e-commerce. But one of the most effective methods to battle counterfeit products is by partnering with government agencies. We work with Customs and Border Patrol to identify counterfeit products that are trying to enter our stream of commerce. It's a constant battle, but one that's important for safety assurance. Now, with the right safety and quality assurance processes, the marketplace safeguards, we think that high-powered lithium-ion batteries will continue to revolutionize the consumer products market in the North American marketplace. Thank you.
Thanks, Don and Charles. Now we've had what lithium-ion batteries are, how they're made, the Samsung experience and how to do the root cause analysis and the changes they made, and the fraudulent and counterfeit concerns. And now we'll hear from Rick Brenner, who takes us as an importer and the things that he has to look for when purchasing products with lithium-ion batteries.
Thank you, Katie. And thanks to CPSc for the invitation and the opportunity to speak to all of you. My experience comes from 20 years as an importer. I headed a large consumer products company in the promotional products industry and have spent hundreds of hours in factories overseas overseeing quality and compliance, as product safety and compliance was one of my responsibilities. You could subtitle my presentation today, "My often frustrating search for a bright line," particularly related to lithium-ion. What could I do as an importer that would guarantee to the greatest possibility that the product would be safe? It's an honor for me to be on this panel with Samsung and Panasonic, who I'm happy to say are not part of the problem that I'm going to talk to you about. They were the standard that we were trying to find a way to achieve. One disclaimer that my comments are mine alone. I learned this from watching lots of CPSc presentations. They do not represent the views of any organization of which I have had a leadership role. So I want to talk about the challenges faced by anybody who's importing products, and particularly lithium-ion products, why it's difficult, and make some suggestions of what could be done to make things better. The short version is we need stricter regulations and greater enforcement. That's the bottom line that I'm going to be advocating today. So for an importer, a lot of our work starts at this show. Last week, about 4,000 exhibitors exhibited in Hong Kong at the Hong Kong Gifts and Premium Fair, and tens of thousands of exhibitors, many from the U.S. Retailers, distributors, suppliers of all kinds that are searching for the newest and latest. The one key thing that you should know related to lithium-ion is that an enormous percentage of the products that were displayed at this show are powered by lithium-ion. The number of experts in lithium-ion at this show is de minimis. The number of lithium-ion experts who were attendees at the show looking at these products is de minimis. And therein lies the problem. Thank you, Charlie, for your power, for your battery. This is what I call a mobile power bank. If you are running out of charge and you're at a baseball game and you need to charge your phone, you can take one of these devices and plug your phone in and get a charge. They have become ubiquitous. They certainly are ubiquitous in the promotional products industry. You can see here that some particular law firm is giving these away. Promotional products, by the way, are generally given away for free. Companies buy them to give away as a promotion. But you would find these same products at retail as well, whether you go into a bookstore, whether you go online to any of the familiar e-commerce sites, you'll find the same products. They're ubiquitous everywhere. This was my introduction to lithium-ion safety. Customer called up and said, one of the people that we gave these away to just called us and said that they put the thing down on their kitchen counter, heard it whistling, turned around, and fire was spewing out of one end of it. As a matter of fact, you can see this particular product had never even been plugged in. And it burned up pretty quickly. So, the challenge is obvious, that maybe if nobody had been home, maybe the house would have burned down. Maybe a kid could have been killed. Maybe the whole family could have been killed. So the question that I had as the CEO and Chief Safety Officer of the company is, why did this occur, and what steps should we take in sourcing this product to prevent this? This happened right in the beginning where we started handling these products, because there was a point in time, probably was around 2011, when at that Hong Kong show, everybody was showing these power banks, and they became extremely popular. So this was my first step. I gathered my entire supply sourcing team, along with the company that we had bought the product from, which was a trading company, along with the factory where the trading company had bought the product from, and went to UL's facility in Guangzhou, I believe. Now, of the people in this photograph, the two guys with the lanyards around their neck are from UL. They're the only two guys in the whole picture that have expertise in lithium-ion. And even the guy who's standing next to the guy with the lanyard on, he's the owner of the factory where this came from. He's not an expert either. He bought components from somebody else. He's an expert at assembling products. And that's another important thing to know, is that a lot of the companies that are making these products are simply assembling them. And as Charlie said to me while we were talking after lunch, they might have been assembling something very different the week before. It's probably a little bit cynical, but not terribly so. So this is what this product looks like on the inside. It's exactly what Charlie was talking about when he showed you the 18650 cell. That pink part on the right side of this photograph that looks like a AAA battery. But it's not a AAA battery, it's a lithium-ion cell. The other important element of this photograph is that little circuit board there. That's actually two circuit boards plugged in together, and that it is referred to amongst manufacturers of these products as the battery management system. And so I'm going to talk a lot about that battery management system. The other thing that you should notice is that battery management system, those circuit boards, are connected to the cell by wires. That's all done by hand. Another significant thing when you go into these factories, and I thought it was significant when Charlie was talking about the welds and the problem with the welds. This is all done by handwork. So let's talk about the components of a lithium-ion power bank. This one pictured here is similar to the one that I just showed you, only this one has two cells. It also has a battery management system. So the cell could be an 18650 cell, that's the one that looks like the AA or AAA battery, or it could be a prismatic one, which is the one that Charlie was talking about, that gets pressed flat, typically used in products that either need larger capacity or because of the shape it needs to have a different shape. But it's basically the same thing. So it's got the circuitry, the battery management system, and that's a very, very critical element. because there are a number of functions. That battery management system serves as a second level of protection. The first level of protection is the cell that Samsung or Panasonic manufactures. And Charlie described in good detail the protections that are built into those cells. But if that fails, the battery management system is supposed to take effect, and it particularly takes effect in the use of the product. That is, once somebody plugs it in, because if you look back at this photograph here, if you look closely at that circuit board, you'll see there's two ports there. One port is the USB that you plug into to plug your phone in, and the other one is what you plug your charger in to charge the item. So the function that battery management system, among other things, is against plugging it into the wrong charger, for example, or overcharging or wrong voltage. So you've got a housing, you've got wire, you've got insulating materials. Those are the various components. So each one of those is a critical aspect of what could go wrong. So here are the considerations. Cell selection. Charlie talked about Tier 1 manufacturers. That's a very important consideration in selecting cells. There is a lot of controversy as to whether there's a significant difference in the cells. That's certainly beyond my expertise to know. All I know is that the first-tier manufacturers, you have the assurance of knowing that there's a very strict quality control program in place. So one of the things when I was in China was trying to ensure that Samsung batteries, notwithstanding the Note 7 difficulty, that Samsung cells were used in our products. That alone was a challenge, because unless you're buying $1 million a week, you can't buy from Samsung. So then you have to buy from a distributor. So I took that same group of people to the distributor to say, how can you show my inspector here, who's going to inspect every single shipment, how can you show him how he can detect a counterfeit battery? Because if a power bank manufacturer can get an extra 50 cents or more for a battery because it says Samsung on it, there's a significant incentive for him to put a pink wrapper around it and print Samsung on it. How could we tell if that was a counterfeit? The circuit board design, that is a black box, because most of the people that assemble these do not design the circuit boards. So to be assured of the design of the circuit board, you really have to send it to somebody like UL or some independent consultant that can do an evaluation. One of the reasons that I am such a proponent of certification is that UL certification, in any case of the 2056, which is their new standard for power banks, not only includes certification of the cell, which most cells are certified to UL 1642, I believe. To get the full 2056, the actual battery management system, not only does that have to be certified, but all the components itself have to be certified. So that's why it's so important for me as an importer, because at least it's a third party looking over somebody's shoulder saying, yes, you do have a quality product. Other considerations, levels of protection, the component selection on the board, and as I said, third-party evaluation. So testing and certification is a very challenging thing to those of us who are not electrical engineers. There's lots of numbers, lots of standards organizations, and lots of considerations. The most important one I want to talk to you about is that one in the upper left-hand corner, because it's the only one that is required. And unfortunately, in many cases, it's the only one that's done, and that's that UN 38.3. It's a transportation standard. It's required, or you can't ship the product, but it's primarily focused on mechanical aspects, not electrical. So while it's heavily oriented to drop tests and other mechanical tests of hazards that might occur during shipment, it doesn't protect, it doesn't test anything about using the product in real life. So I raised the question, should a transportation standard drive lithium-ion safety testing strategy? There are many companies, mine included, the one that I ran, that did far more than this. But there are many, as I'm going to show you, that don't do more than this, and it's why I advocate a stricter standard. This is an experience I had as a consumer, and it just gives you an example of what the challenges are. The battery on the left side is a Nikon battery for a camera that they have, and it's about $185. The camera retailer is not allowed to discount the camera. So the camera retailer says, but we'll give you an extra battery when you buy the product. So the extra battery they gave is the one that was pictured on the right side. And as you notice, maybe you can't, the Nikon battery is UL certified and it lists the certification number on the battery. The generic battery has no such certification. So this particular retailer that I bought this from has a website where you can enter comments. So I went online by this product and I said, I'm not certain what the safety testing of this battery is, but you probably should ask those questions before you buy this, okay? The retailer refused to post that comment. And so I got into a rather protracted discussion with their corporate communications. Now, I'm not talking about a small store. I'm talking about a billion-dollar retailer. They refused to post my comment. After 3 weeks, they finally produced a letter from me from the generic manufacturer saying it was tested to UN 38.3. Here are some other challenges that you have. These are both solicitations that I received. Lowest pricing UL certified battery. So now you get into an issue that is confusing because the cell, if you go back to the picture of the cells might be UL certified, as I said, to UL 1642. But that doesn't mean that the entire battery pack, including the battery management system, is certified. And that's what's really important. Yes, of course it's important to have the cell certified, but these are ads for battery packs. And by the way, the same exact situation is the case with 38.3. Not only does the cell need to be certified to UN 38.3, but the assembled power bank has to be certified. And that's a significant issue where many times the documentation that's produced for a power bank to 38.3 is really what came from the cell manufacturer, not a separate test by the manufacturer. And this was maybe the most disappointing situation of all to me. By the way, I have purposely not included the names of the companies involved here because I don't think that's really important. I think what's really important is that these issues exist. I suspect the companies involved that I'm giving examples of are not the only ones. But as you can imagine, having a power bank that exploded as the one that I showed you, finding reliable solutions was a critical element. So when one of my supply chain people told me that they found a factory that is making power banks from one of the most recognizable battery companies in the world, a name that there's not an individual in the U.S. over 15 years of age who doesn't know this name as a household name. So when I heard this, I was ecstatic. I thought we hit the mother lode. And I went to the factory, and we negotiated an exclusive arrangement to distribute these power banks. And then I started with the due diligence. Show me the documentation, show me the documentation. And we kept hearing, well, the company in the U.S., the company that I'm not going to tell you their name, did the testing, and we're just waiting to get it from them. Long story short, because our time is limited, there was no testing. Absolutely no testing. There was 38.3, and in fact, of one of the power banks, the 38.3 test that was shown to me was the 38.3 of a cell that was a Chinese cell. It wasn't a Samsung or a Panasonic or an LG. It was from some other company, and it was the 38.3. Even the battery power bank from this brand name, yet the power bank bore the name of the well-known company with no other qualifier. And I was livid about this. So I wrote to the CEO of the Fortune 50 company in the U.S. that name it was on it. And I was surprised that I actually got an email back in 10 minutes saying that I'm going to refer this to our people and they'll get back to you. And that's this email that you're looking at here. And basically this email said that the CEO contacted me. Thank you for bringing this to our attention. This is a licensed product. Licensees test their own. We don't have anything to do with it. We trust they'll do the right thing. If you have any issues, you can talk to our global head of licensing. That was the answer. It was pretty shocking. My last example is to talk about the pressures that retailers have and importers have for price, and how when people are overzealous in wanting to make a sale, how safety can go out the window. I could show you 100 of these. This particular one is significant because it was an RFP from a Major League Baseball team that wanted to give away 30,000 power banks at the stadium and sent out an RFP to distributors giving detailed specifications for what they were looking for. There are no safety specifications, so don't squint trying to find them. But what is significant is that the maximum budget was $3. Now, $3 end user price would mean that we would have to buy that product as the importer for about $1.50 to sell it to the distributor, who would then sell it to the team. So we not only refused to participate, but I begged the distributor not to participate as well, and he walked away. But this goes on all the time. Just because I said no, somebody else is going to say yes. And these can be had, but there isn't going to be any safety testing. So what can we do about that? So the first thing I want to do is congratulate CPSc for the initiative. This is available on CPSC's website. Doug Lee put this together. Thank you, Doug. Fantastic work. This is all part of CPSC's wonderful initiative on lithium-ion batteries. And the 4 steps that CPSC outlined: improving standards, outreach to education, collaborate with external partners. It's fantastic. But at the end of the day, what we really need is a holistic standard that requires anybody importing or selling these products to have tested the entire thing, because the battery management system is such a critical part, and there's no requirement for anybody to do that. I threw out maybe use the 15J rule, and others have told me now you can't really use the 15J rule because it's got to be an observable characteristic, and maybe that UL certification mark on the Nikon battery isn't enough. It's over my head and beyond my pay grade to know whether that's true or not. I know that we need to have a standard that you can't bring a power bank or a battery pack into this country unless the entire system is tested. So thank you, I appreciate it, and acknowledgments to UL and Energy Assurance for their technical assistance.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks to all my panelists, Rick, Don, and Charlie. Those are three fascinating presentations, sort of starting at the beginning of the manufacture of the cell and working all the way through the process to the importers and distributors. I know we are running out of time, but I'm hoping we can squeeze in time for a question or two. Yep, if anybody has questions.
This question's for Rick. You mentioned on UN 38.3 that there was no electronic or electrical testing involved. My recollection on UN 38.3 is there's actually 3 tests. The overcharge test, T7, the forced discharge test, T8, and the external short, T5. Could you clarify what you were referring to then in your comment?
Yeah, my understanding, and I would defer to Charlie on this because he knows way more about this than I do, but my understanding is that it doesn't test the entire system in use. It doesn't test the system when you plug in a charger. Yes, it's heavily oriented to mechanical. It does have some electrical, but it doesn't test the entire system. Charlie, can you?
These are truly, and they were developed as transportation tests. And the tests that you mentioned are the correct ones you mentioned. And there's T1 through T8. But again, they truly are limited for transportation, and they serve a purpose for that. They're definitely not the only test you should be doing on cells and batteries.
So seeing nobody else, that'll end the panel 3. Thanks very much. All right, so we are ready for our final panel today, our 4th panel, which is our Stakeholders Perspectives panel. This panel will be moderated by Richard O'Brien, who is the Director of the Office of International Programs here at CPSc. So regulatory cooperation should be relevant and responsive to real-world challenges. A stakeholders panel will provide perspectives on new trends, products, and hazards, and what can be done within the North America cooperation framework. Points that they're going to focus on this afternoon include cooperation and best practices, policy alignment, and consumer messaging. Our panelists for this panel are Augustin Adame, independent consultant, formerly with Profeco; Belinda May, ICFSO president and partner with the law firm Denton's US LLP;
Carol Pollock Nelson, PhD and independent safety consultant, and Jean Ryder, a principal at Exponent Product Safety Consulting.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are the caboose on this train. We'll try to make it interesting for you. And I thank Rick for saying what I should already say, which is none of the opinions that I express necessarily reflect those of the Commission. And I'm going to just go into the question that you're undoubtedly asking, and that is, why are we having this panel here? What's the point of it? We have specifically planned a panel to take into account the thoughts and views of a diverse group of stakeholders, and there must be some reason behind it. So first of all, maybe the most obvious, all three countries in this partnership are democracies. And in democracies, we believe that people should have a voice, and we try to build in a way to listen to the voices of the stakeholders. Second reason is failure to do that kind of puts governments in an echo chamber where we're just talking back and forth to each other, and that's not necessarily the most creative way to solve problems. And the third is, I'm going to apply a little bit of conditional logic here. The third reason is, if governments had all the answers, there would be no private sector. And since there is a private sector, it follows, therefore, that government doesn't have all the answers. So those are three reasons for having this panel this afternoon. And I would just ask our panelists, as they talk to us, to do one thing, to really be sure that you do the following. Please be really clear during your presentations when you're making a point that you think the three regulators, the three agencies, really need to take away today from all of the other things that you say, which are undoubtedly very useful. But make sure that we get the takeaways from you, okay? Now, I think we're going to start with Augustine. And do you need access to the computer here? Okay, so we will begin. Thank you.
Well, I'll try to do all the presentation in English just to practice it. If not, be prepared with the headphones. So, well, I thank the CPSc for the invitation today. It's my fourth summit in different seats, but it's good news, not only for me because I'm here. I'm very glad to be here in DC, but to hear of the summit continues. It's at least 8 years since the first summit, and maybe 2 years prior to the first summit to plan the first summit. So it's a long time, and that shows at least many goals have been achieved. So not only goals, as Richard is talking to us, for the government, also to the other stakeholders. That's the reason I was interested in coming here, because I think it's a very good thing that three agencies continue working together. It has been done the last years, because achievements have been important. So I'll start my presentation with, it's not the first slide, it's the name of the presentation, but it's also a statement. We are all consumers, and no one can deny that. Maybe you can go to a meeting either with the authorities or in a voluntary standard, and if we all go to defend our product, it won't take us to any place. We have to go as consumers, because having in mind that in the room in the other room, it can be a standard for toys, and you have small children, and you like to have a standard that protects your children for any danger they can get from the product. Having that in mind, I start by numbering the stakeholders that most of the voluntary or regulations have on their tables. First of all are manufacturers, the importers, the wholesalers of any size. In Mexico, it's very common we invite the academy. I'll try to go through that. Why do we do that? Also the consumers, the NGOs, individual groups. As Profeco is something I know well, is not do not make the regulations. It's usually use the seat of consumer representation, also in the developing standards in Mexico. So it's not included in that groups, but it's generally the seat for the consumers is used by Profeco. The government, in Mexican case, is the Secretary of Economy, and other people that are interested in the making of the standard, or any are interested in the product, either in discussion with the authorities or in the standardization process. This is how I see each group could be participating when you have to give ideas of how to make the product safer for the consumers. Manufacturers. I had some examples of the importance of the participation of the manufacturers in the standard development or in the discussions with the authority. But after the panel, with previous panel with lithium batteries, it comes even more important. When Samsung was talking about the problem with the tablet, he talks and told us he invited 700 engineers to try to solve the problem. If we have a problem with a product at any point, and we don't have manufacturers in the country, it would be very difficult to solve it in that country, because they are the experts in the product, and they are the only ones that can give the best ideas on how to solve the problem on safety. I have been in several countries in Central America and South America. They don't have manufacturers of almost any product. And I have been in meetings where they are discussing a standard, but I don't know how they discuss the standard without manufacturers. I cannot imagine. Mainly, they invite importers, and most of the importers are represented by law firms. So, and they know very well the laws, but not the product. So manufacturers, we are here in the North America Summit. I think we are privileged to have manufacturers in the three countries, and it's when we go to either to make a standard or to do the discussion with the authorities, we can invite the experts. So we have to work with that, and the manufacturer have to be open, like a consumer, to give everything the manufacturer can. Some of the items I think we can expect for the manufacturer are the incident data, consumer feedback, flaws detected in quality control. Maybe they detect the problem and solve it inside the manufacturer facility. But sometimes to give away that information would be very, very useful for authorities, because some other manufacturers, smaller manufacturers or importers, could detect the failure even before it goes out to the market. So that information, I consider, it's very important to give to the groups of discussion and could solve problems even before they occur. That is the purpose for any standard or any decision made by the authorities. How to eliminate, if they find out the product has been, it's in the market and has a problem, how they can correct it. The proposals to correct them that will be easier for the consumer also would be and are very necessary when the risk is detected. They also know perfectly well how to use the equipment. So they can train not only their people. A problem we have seen, at least in Mexico, and I'm very, much more convinced that it's very important to take it. The previous panel, they talked about the case of lithium batteries, and there were only 2 experts in UL, in the whole UL, to test the batteries. When any of the authorities can't publish a standard, and they accredited the laboratories, which expert is the one in charge to accredit that expert? So sometimes the accreditation goes through and gets to a laboratory with experts that are not really experts in the field. At least for a product as big as lithium batteries are, there were only 2 people really prepared to test them. And if Mexico or Canada adopted the UL standard, which one will be training the experts in the other country? That's a very technical issue, but it's a very big issue at least in Mexico. That's enough for manufacturers. Importers, well, I said they can or cannot have experts, but even though they can recall some experts from the manufacturer of origin, they do participate, or they can participate through distance, through the internet. So we can encourage importers, I think, to participate on that way. They have incident data, consumer complaints, product traceability. It's also very important because maybe the product is not the problem, but the insumes to manufacture the product will be very important to know where it comes from. Maybe it's very used in the CPSc to make that traceability, but for other countries it's not so common to get to that point of knowing the traceability of products. I put the last item is ingenious manufacturing report. I was asked by the CPSc what I was talking about. It's not ingenious in the nice sense. It's ingenious in the bad sense. In Mexico, we have seen many importers or even the manufacturers on other countries to sell products. If you can buy a container, but maybe half the container complies with the standard, and the other part does not comply with the standard. The reason is they can reduce the cost by doing that. And when they show us in the table for certification bodies, this kind of knowledge the manufacturers have, it's a big problem because we have standard, we have testings, but when these importers, with their knowledge or without their knowledge, they import that kind of product, I think there would be a very important data to show the authorities or the standardization bodies about these ingenious companies. So many some other manufacturers can or importers can stop buying from them. Marketers or traders, I think, is the same thing, the incidents data, consumer complaints, product traceability, process for repairing the recall, sales data, and consumer feedback. So there are common things between them. The academy. Well, the academy, they have not only 700 engineers, they have thousands of engineers that can go to the standardization process with the authorities and help us a lot to develop a standard. They doesn't charge anything for doing that, so that's also a very good notice. They know very well the laboratory equipment, and something very complicated in the standards, or when an authority has a decision to make, is the mathematical models, and they're very, very good in that. They have helped in Mexico to develop voluntary or regulations a lot with that help. That's why, and I haven't seen the academy in ASTM standards or ISO or UL standards, so maybe it would be interesting to consider as a stakeholder also the academy. Also, consumers, associations, particulars, or even Profeco, they have also very good information about the products. They have technical experts. Each of these was as an important issue. Canada, United States, and Mexico are the only consumer product agencies that has a laboratory in all the Americas. There are no other laboratories from Mexico to Tierra del Fuego, Argentina. So it's very important to have the experts of the laboratory working with the stakeholders, with the standardizations as the people or their authorities. Well, as I said, it's very important to the participation of the stakeholders of the laboratories, the certification body, and standardization bodies, because they are the ones that use the standards. They are the ones that give you a certificate to import it or to export the product. So it would be very important, and I haven't heard of a lot of this participating as a stakeholder, and it's very important for them to participate. The Consumer Protection Agency has also a lot of information that they could be used in the developing of standards or the discussions for risk management. The importance of cooperation. What we are looking for is similar level of protection for all consumers. And it would be also a benefit for all the other stakeholders, principally for the manufacturers and the importers. We have laboratories. Well, the institution has laboratory, and similar proposals also have been made today, and they can achieve a lot of more things if we get them the information. Richard told us to take out something we would like to take out from the agencies. It's difficult to do that, but principally I'll try to think of working together in the developing of the standards. That we are the agencies are not doing that. For Mexico is difficult, but because they have the experts, but they don't have the language for many terms in discussions on ASTM or UL. No? So that would be a very good effort to work together in the standards development.
Okay, thank you very much, Agustin. And Belinda is, I think, going to speak next. And I should just mention it's interesting that each one of our panelists either has a recent change of job or concurrently does different jobs. Either way, there's a ton of experience up here, and it's really beneficial. So thank you.
Before we talk about which job I'm going to talk from first, it would be useful to know how to advance the slides. There we go. Look, I didn't even have to advance the slides. Wow. Got it? Okay. Perfect. Okay, so thanks again, and thank you very much to CPSc, Health Canada, and Profeco for the invitation to speak today. If you were not here this morning, then you didn't hear me say that I am here on behalf of two different stakeholder groups today, very much on purpose. The first, I guess you could just say, is industry. I'm a partner at Denton's US LLP. We're a law firm based around the world. The second group that I'm here representing today, it is my honor to be here with you as president of ICFSO. We are celebrating our 25th year this year. Again, if you were not here this morning, then you also didn't hear me introduce my my partner in this endeavor. I'd like everybody to acknowledge and recognize Mark Schoem, who's in the back of the room, and he's waving reluctantly. Yep. He's known in these parts anyway. But it's very important for us to talk a little bit about the perspectives and whether or not those perspectives align in ways that we may not be conscious of, but that they're already aligned. So with that, we'll move on to the stakeholders that are either here today or are represented here today by proxy or otherwise. And so if we look at the stakeholder cloud, I'm looking at you in the audience, and I'm seeing you struggle. I'm seeing you worry, and that's because that's indicative of our challenge. It's indicative of our challenge to first and foremost recognize the multitude of voices that must come together in order to benefit everyone on the supply chain. And so that we can talk as stakeholders on how we might serve you, the three principal agencies that have invited us to be here today to assist you in your challenge. So these are lots of points of view, and frankly, I was telling Rich at the break, maybe I should just go straight to BWI because a lot of the things I was going to say today have already been touched on. He threatened me and said, no, you'll go ahead and speak. Actually, he didn't say it quite like that. But what I thought would be the most powerful is to highlight the two takeaways from each of our principal speakers this morning that I was moved by because it shows the thought alignment between the heads of these agencies and, in my opinion, industry, what industry believes, wants, and is interested in, as well as the beloved ICFSO model that we'll talk more about. So first, from Acting Chairman Buerkle, what we see in the North American Summit and the resulting work that has been done since 2011, and in particular this week, is a stronger, more efficient, and transparency that has never existed before among the three agencies. This is information that my industry colleagues want to know and need to know. Next, from Federal Attorney Cerda, science is the key and is the foundation to a globalized world and finding areas for unification. He also shared with us that the attitudes, visions, and paradigms of the three agencies have changed. So from an industry standpoint, you can't not care about what is happening in unification. And indeed, once the process matures to fruition, we will find such efficiency, whether that becomes reporting, whether that becomes compliance, whether multiple types of reverse logistics, borders. The fact is the more the agencies are aligned and transparent, the better off all will be, even if some people go kicking and screaming, but that's for a different topic. We also had Director Ianniero point out maybe the most salient feature of all, and that is technology has delivered for us a borderless society. So even though our nation states necessarily have limitations, no one's saying they don't. Jeff Barrett did a great job earlier today explaining that. The fact is, the consumers, also pointed out by Federal Attorney Cerda, consumers are going to have the last say in any event. It's the consumers in this word cloud that are the most important of all. And it goes way beyond just making sure we keep one baby safer. It goes clearly to the point of making sure that industry stakeholders understand ways they can improve their goodwill, ways that they can increase their own loyalty with their customers. In other words, it's extremely cyclical. It's very logical. You'll also note that I don't have, this is trick in case anybody's trying to catch me, but this is fun. ICFSO in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen is not included in the stakeholder grouping, and it's not for the purpose of exclusion, on the contrary. It's because, speaking now with my ICFSO hat on, ICFSO seeks to facilitate, as its mission, more than ever before, a platform as a neutral that facilitates the conversation for each of the stakeholders that you see in the stakeholder cloud. So next, let's move on to stakeholder alignment. I do better with visual. I just do better. I've seen a lot of the mathematical calculations, and about as far as I go with true mathematics really is Venn diagrams. So I'm a big fan of Venn diagrams. That I understand. So the resulting and resoundingly successful progress from this summit already reflects huge strides in alignment. But I think unless we realize the two bookends on either side of products are absolutely the takeaways that the three agencies can focus on heavily, innovation on the left side and collaboration on the right side, serving as the bookends for the products. We often talk about consumer product safety. Frankly, the products are merely a symptom. The safer the product, that means the better the innovation and collaboration pieces are working. How well the products are doing is a symptom of how the other features are operating. And so I believe strongly, and I think I might be mixing up my hats, the industry hat and the ICFSO hat. That's okay. It's late in the day. I believe that products are a symptom of unified safety. Unified safety. That's the larger encompassing circle in the Venn diagram. So unified safety takes into account innovation. We are indeed in the exponential age. There is one thing and one thing only that we can count on, and that is that the speed of change will continue to increase. That is the only certainty we can all take to the bank. Recognizing that a very informal group of folks around the world decided that it might not be a bad idea to think about an innovative products process standard. because we thought that somehow or other that might actually help the 3 agencies in their work down the line, because trying to keep up with the regulatory constraints and oftentimes handcuffs with which you must work, whether that be budgets, whether that be timing, whether that be self-reporting structures, doesn't really matter. We got the idea that maybe, just maybe, there was a way to advance safety by creating an innovative products process standard. So now we're for sure switching to the ICPSO hat right now. Advance the idea with my friend Jean Ryder, who will speak next, or after Carol, on this topic. I also picked the brains of guys like George Borlaise, Jeff Barrett, and multiple people around the world to see how they might feel about exploring this. And so as a result, we're going to have a task force, an independent task force meeting at the Seattle ICPSO on Monday afternoon, and we're not sure where it will go from there, but what we do know is that we are committed to finding a way to serve everybody in the stakeholder cloud that was in my first slide. And then finally, to wrap it up, Rich said that stakeholder takeaways were important, and this is like probably the scariest part of my day. I'm going to fly home to San Francisco tonight, and I'm probably going to obsess for the next 6 hours whether or not this was a smart move or not. But anyway, here goes. Normally I share the contents of this slide with industry in an effort to help industry stakeholders shift their paradigms about working with agencies. Today, though, I am offering my own personal little long-standing rules of the road in an effort that hopefully, and share them with you as agencies and stakeholders, and with the hard work you're doing, it maybe, just maybe, some of the things that I share with industry will help you. And so the first one is, it's always about the science. It just always is. Whether it's financial science or economic science or human factors science, engineering science, and maybe I should have put in there governmental science, it is always about the science. And if anybody ever says to the contrary, that's just not accurate. Number 2, the U.S. fast track model. Wow, wow, wouldn't it be amazing if we had a fast track model that we could come to all 3 of you and do a fast track recall with all 3 of you with one portal. I realize that, like I said, I will obsess the whole ride to San Francisco, whether or not this was a really stupid thing to say, and I'll never be invited back again, but Richard asked me to please just say what I felt, so I'm doing it. That would be amazing. Industry remains daunted by the challenge of different timing, different compliance staff, frankly, different outcomes, different remedies, different requirements for reverse logistics. And if there were a way to apply just conceptually a fast track model for all 3, I think that would take us a long ways toward unified safety. My next point is that there's always a solution. Anybody who works with me knows that an unqualified no is not the way to proceed with me ever. I'm going to need a reason. What do I mean by that? I mean, in order for us to be thoughtful, if we accept that just because we don't know a solution today, there isn't one, how do we put a man on the moon? In other words, there's always a solution. So the rule that I follow is, if I'm stuck, I go leave it, and come back and read it again cold the next morning. In that regard, the application to this day and to you is to make the plan for the very next summit. Probably already is on the calendar, but the fact that you've already achieved such amazing strides from my perspective means that if not fully solved today, it will be. The fourth point is the ICFSO model. I'm obviously a little biased, but I feel like the fact that we are in an inclusive and non-polarizing conversation today is the very essence of the ICFSO model. And you know, this is a little trite. I feel like I might be a little bit bumper stickerish on this one, but you know, if we're frowning, we're not smiling, right? If we're screaming, we're not talking. We're not having a conversation. So if we're in the conversation, our chances for getting to that solution increase exponentially. And then finally, I can't even believe I'm putting this on a slide in front of the people that I normally say I'm talking about you. It's Belinda's AAA rule. The last thing you want to do, manufacturer, importer, client, is have the agency surprised. So if we shift our paradigm to how can we take a look at Section 15B in a new way, that's the U.S., Section 14 in Canada, and for me, for Profeco, it winds up being a phone call to the people I know at Profeco. But if we can make sure that we're approaching the self-reporting nature of our structure with the AAA rule, and that is avoiding surprise, we will avoid things that if I were talking to my industry clients, we'll avoid things like civil penalties. Here, I don't want to come off pejorative or in any way critical, but the more you all are synergized amongst each other, and nobody finds themselves surprised about a direction that one of the agencies is taking, then it may not have value at all, but I do know that it works in industry. And so that's it for me. I want to thank you again. I also can't help myself in inviting you to Seattle for ICFSO's next regional meeting. That's June 19th, and then Brussels, November 12th and 13th. And our annual meeting is back in the District of Columbia next February. So hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you very much, Belinda, and thank you for speaking freely. You're among friends here. You can do that. Carol, speak freely.
I'm going to do my best.
Okay.
First, I just want to say thanks for including me in today's proceedings. The U.S., Canada, and Mexico are to be lauded for coming together to work together on product safety. This is undoubtedly going to benefit consumers in all three countries. I'm a human factors psychologist, and I specialize in consumer product safety. And I realize that a lot of people don't know what human factors is. It's an odd discipline. So I'm just going to take a second to tell you about it, if you don't mind. Human factors is a discipline that seeks to understand and enhance the interaction between people and the things that they use and the spaces that they use them in. So within that definition, I'm very focused just on consumer product safety. So I look at the interaction between consumers and the products that they use. When I'm looking into a product, the key question that I'm asking myself is, how is the consumer going to use the product? And that includes foreseeable who are the foreseeable users, including sometimes unintended users. Sometimes we have adult products that children are using. Another question I ask is, what are the uses that we can anticipate with the product? And this includes unintended uses, sometimes called alternative uses or misuse. And in cases where there is misuse, I want to, there we go, okay. I want to know, I'm sorry, I'm pressing too hard, I guess. Okay, I'll just talk. I want to know what are the reasons for the misuse and how reasonable is that misuse? We have to answer the question about the reasonableness of the misuse because ultimately I want to decide what's the recommendation. Is it that we need to change the product, change the instructions, change something else, maybe not change anything? So we've got to understand all these factors about the use of the product. So as you saw from my next slide, I will be talking a bit about voluntary standards, but before I do, I just want to say, since we're talking about stakeholders, I do represent a lot of different stakeholder groups, I guess. Sometimes, I really work with all stakeholders, so sometimes I am working with consumers. I work with consumers when I petition the CPSc. I've petitioned on a number of different products that I was concerned about, everything from window coverings with the cords that can cause strangulation, to gas fireplaces with the excessively hot glass fronts, bunk beds, even bunk beds, which have had mandatory and voluntary standards for decades. One of the key elements of that standard was that there were not allowed to be spaces in the head and footboard that could present a head and neck entrapment that could lead to strangulation. However, that same provision was not extended to the side ladder where it intersects with the bunk bed. So even though there was only maybe one death every 18 months, those deaths were entirely preventable. So it's only one death every 18 months unless it's your child. And especially when it's something that we knew about the hazard pattern and we already knew how to prevent it. So those are just some examples, and I also work as an expert witness in litigation on behalf of plaintiffs. So you might be thinking I work, as a consumer advocate, and I don't. I also work just as much with manufacturers. I work as a consultant to industry, and I try to go through these very factors that we've discussed, which is how is someone going to use the product. And the reason I want to know this is because I want to talk honestly with the manufacturer about whether or not anticipated uses might lead to injuries or deaths, and if they do, is it possible that you might need to change your product design, possibly the instructions, or perhaps it's the way that the product is marketed. So I work with all the different stakeholders. I work with government agencies as well, testing laboratories. But regardless of who I'm working with, I always have the same goal, and that is to enhance consumer product safety. And so one of the most important ways that I can think of, I have to apologize because when I press a button, different things happen. So I hope I'll get to my slide. The right button, right? Okay. Okay, here we go. So one of the most important ways that I work, that I think we can all work towards the benefit of the safety of consumer products is through our work and participation in voluntary standards. Voluntary standards, as my colleague said, brings together all stakeholders, manufacturers, retailers, consumers and consumer advocates, scientists, and testing laboratories, and people like you who are in this room. I'm sorry, I have no control over this, but people like you in this room from the different agencies, from Profeco, Health Canada, and the CPSc. And the objective of voluntary standards, as you know, is to promote product safety, and that's done through the development of performance requirements, as well as requirements sometimes for the instructions and warnings that might accompany that product. One example of a voluntary standard that has benefited tremendously from the involvement of my colleagues at CPSc and Health Canada, as well as other stakeholders, is the Subcommittee for Liquid Laundry Packets, for which I serve as the co-chair along with my colleague Rick Hackman from Procter & Gamble. The Liquid Laundry Packets voluntary standard brought together all stakeholders, including regulatory staff. The involvement of agency staff was essential to developing a standard that we hope will lead to a significant reduction in poisonings associated with liquid laundry packets. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the standard really quickly because I think it's important to hear what resulted from this collaboration. The standard includes design requirements that are aimed at reducing both the attractiveness of the laundry packets and also access to those laundry packets. And this requirement includes things like, number one, requiring the use of an aversive agent, like a bittering agent, on the exterior soluble packaging. Number two, it requires that the packaging has to be opaque, or it has to otherwise visibly mask the contents that we think are attractive to children. And the third thing, most importantly, is that the packaging has to be difficult for children to access. Now, this last factor is defined in a number of different ways, which allow manufacturers a menu of options to select from in order to figure out how they will achieve packaging that is difficult for children to access. So one of the options, for example, is manufacturers can individually wrap the laundry packets and have like a little hidden tear notch that would be difficult for little children to pick up on and also to open. Another option is they can design the exterior packaging in a way that exceeds the dexterity and manipulative capabilities of young children. And yet a third option that they have is to design the exterior packaging in a way that's difficult for young children, that exceeds the cognitive and intellectual capabilities of young children. So this creative approach that we came up with, this sort of multifaceted approach, was due to the contributions and the involvement of all stakeholders, and in particular we had a lot of stakeholder involvement from Health Canada and from CPSc. Furthermore, beyond drafting this initial standard, it is the continued involvement of all the stakeholders, including the regulatory staff, that's important for answering this next question that we're dealing with, and it's a difficult question, and that is, where do we set the threshold for when we say the standard is being successful? At what point do we say we're doing a good enough job? This is important, and it's leading to a lot of controversy and debate with all of the stakeholders around the table, healthy debate. But this is important because if the standard is not adequate, if it's not doing what it needs to do, we will go back to the table and we will incorporate additional performance requirements into the standard. Because ultimately our goal is to make the product less of a risk to children. Another standard that has benefited tremendously from regulatory staff involvement is the ANSI standard for window coverings, for which I serve on an oversight steering committee. The work on this standard has been challenging, to say the least. The vocal support of my colleagues from CPSc and Health Canada led to the development of the most stringent voluntary standard for window blind coverings, which I am pleased to say will finally eliminate hazardous accessible cords from most, but not all, window covering products. Without a doubt, the support of every stakeholder in the room, including regulatory staff, was essential to developing this most, comparatively speaking, stringent standard. I also want to say that I appreciate having the opportunity to comment on Health Canada's mandatory regulation, which is moving to eliminate hazardous accessible cords from all window covering products. While it would be ideal for our standards to be fully harmonized, it is not possible due to differences in the laws between our countries. Despite these differences, I know we have drawn strength from our shared effort. And I believe that the new ANSI standard, as well as, or I should say certainly with the Health Canada mandatory standard that hopefully will be published in the next 12 months, that these standards are going to benefit the consumers from all the countries in North America. And the reason I say this, and I might be just a little bit optimistic, but I'm really hoping, the reason that I say this is because I do hope that manufacturers will decide that it's economically more prudent to import one type of product that meets just one global standard rather than send products meeting different standards into the different countries. Sorry. I don't have control over this. The final standard that I want to talk about are products that are the standards that are that pertain to products intended for infant sleep. You may have noticed that there are a lot of infant sleep products on the market. We've got cribs, bassinets, play yards, but we also have other products like baby boxes, in-bed sleepers, bedside sleepers, etc. Many of these products facilitate in-room sharing, where the parent is going to share the same room as the baby shares the same room, but not the same bed as the parent. This is important. It's what the AAP, American Academy of Pediatrics, advises for at least the first 6 months of life to reduce the risk of SIDS. Other products are intended to be used in a separate sleep surface. These are products that are in-bed sleepers that provide a separate sleep surface and a perimeter barrier around the exterior, and that's important because there's a risk of asphyxiation due to overlaying if the baby is in the bed and on the same adult surface as the adult. All of the products in the market today that relate to infant sleep are responsive to the needs of parents. As a human factor psychologist, understanding consumers' perceived needs is essential to understanding behavior and why consumers elect to use certain products, why they feel that they need to use certain products. Voluntary standards for infant sleep-related products are developed with the objective of allowing the product to exist in order to satisfy the needs of parents, while at the same time developing performance standards that will hopefully reduce potential hazards. This week, actually last night, I just returned from voluntary standards meetings at the ASTM headquarters in West Conshohocken for the juvenile products. The presence of CPSc and Health Canada technical staff at these meetings was invaluable, as staff contributes to our understanding of the hazard patterns, and that informs what we put in the performance requirements for the standards. In closing, I'd like to reiterate how important it is that we have the participation of regulatory staff from all 3 countries. Our other stakeholders hope to see regulators at the table. Their input is sought and it is highly respected. I am very thankful to CPSc and Health Canada staff, and I hope for their participation, and I hope to work with our esteemed colleagues from Profeco in these voluntary standards as well. Thank you. That's my final slide.
Thank you, Carol. So, Gene,
Okay.
you're on.
Thank you, Rich. And I want to thank CPSc, Health Canada, Profeco, and the Safety Summit organizers for inviting me to participate here today. Before I start on my presentation, I'd like to build a little bit on the conversations that we've had about standards, particularly the conversation that Berlinda brought up in terms of an innovation product process standard. The concept is that we don't know what the future innovative products are going to look like. We have no way of knowing when they're going to appear on the marketplace or in somebody's imagination. But we do know that there are processes by which you can insert safety into or design safety into any product that's available, whether it's virtual reality, which we hadn't seen before 4 or 5 years ago, or it's hoverboards or any other product. We know there's a process by which we can insert safety. So the objective of this team that we're building at ICPHSO is to start to look at who wants to participate and how we would organize ourselves and what the scope would be. The intent of doing it at ICPHSO is because ICPHSO is the one place where all industry gets together. If you go to, think about safety organizations, SDOs, standards organizations, they tend to organize themselves around products or around industries. But innovation is not an industry. Innovation, covers all industries. So we need a place, a location, where we can bring in stakeholders from all sources, all product areas, all product concepts, and all industries in order to build this process standard. And I certainly hope that the regulators will participate with us. And if you think about some of the challenges that I'll call them sellers have, is when an innovation product comes on the market and there's no standard, they have nothing to ask the inventors or the producers or the manufacturers. Did you test that? Did you certify that? There's nothing out there for them to say, did you do that? Because no one knew about the product. It could take years to build a standard for that product. But if we had a process standard, then in fact we would have something that we can hand them and say, did you follow this process? And to design safety into your product before you bring it to the market. So it could serve a very valuable, I believe, this standard could serve a very valuable purpose across the entire marketplace. So I hope that you will support us as we try to work our way through building this. I also want to thank Rich for explaining why we're here and what we're supposed to be doing today. What I really want to talk about today, or what I intended to talk about today, is tolerable product risk. And that's something that we haven't, talked about or touched on at all today, as far as I know, right? And we all know about this recent incident, a motor, an airplane, engine flew apart and someone was killed. And within hours of this incident, we heard from safety professionals, we heard from regulatory agencies, this is a freak accident. The public should not worry, okay? Now, what does that say, okay? It says that some risk is tolerable. The public should not worry, okay? In fact, that was one fatality out of 100 million flights or so, estimated 100 million flights, from March 2009 until now. But if you went back to January 2009, it was actually 50 fatalities out of about 100 million flights. So in one case, you're talking about 1 in 100 million. In another case, you're talking about 5 out of 10 million. So there's a range of tolerability in society, what society will accept in terms of, risk. Now, before you talk about risk, you have to talk about the risk equation. The risk equation is so simple, it's actually complicated. It is the product of exposure and hazard. And what it tells you immediately is that if you have a little exposure and a little hazard, you're going to have a big risk. And that's just how it works. When we're in the consumer products industry, our goal is to have a huge exposure. We don't want to sell tens of products. We want to sell millions of products. So exposure is very high in our consumer products industry. Now, it is very efficient to manage risk by managing hazard. And I noted this morning and this afternoon how often the word hazard was mentioned, but not the word risk. Right? We want to eliminate hazard, we want to control hazard, we want to manage hazard. There's two problems. The first problem is you never can drive hazard to approximate zero. If you could eliminate risk, but it doesn't work that way. There always will be some level of hazard in a product, so there always will be some level of risk in the product category. So what we have to do is we have to really understand what is an unreasonable risk or what is a tolerable risk from our products. And I think this can help drive a number of changes in terms of how we approach, the safety of products, in terms of how we approach the energy that it takes to recall products that may not be unreasonably risky. Right? It can help change how we think about things. In many cases now we hear about recall fatigue. Right? There are so many recalls nobody cares anymore. There's so many recalls that, gee, I've been using this product for years and nothing's wrong with it, so I'm not going to recall it. I'm not going to turn it in. I'm not going to change it. We should think about what scope we really want to have when we talk about tolerable risk. So risk is a probability. It's really a probability of the likelihood of an occurrence and the likely consequence if it occurs. So it's two parts. Is it going to happen? And if it does happen, is somebody going to get hurt? Is there going to be extensive property damage? Right? So it's really two parts. What's the likelihood of it happening and what's the likely consequence? If the likelihood of it happening is really high, but the consequence is really low, then that's a low risk. So I want to deal with this question of hazard, okay? Hazard does not equal risk. And I want to, almost most of you probably touched one of these today, this little bottle cap, right? Now, if a child chokes on this bottle cap, they're probably going to die. This is extremely hazardous. If you choked on this bottle cap, and I hope you don't, right, you might die. I mean, this is an extremely hazardous shape and size. But the reality is, children don't choke on it because of the way it's used, because of the products that it's on. It's how you use the product. Acting Chairman Ann Buerkle just put hers right back on her cap, on her bottle, just like that, just as she did that, right? So we don't have, it's not attractive to children. It's generally not available to young children. It's generally not separated from the bottle, even when we dispose of the bottle. It doesn't represent an unreasonable risk. If you look at the data of the billions of these caps that are in the marketplace versus the injury level, it's shockingly low, shockingly low. So it does not represent an unreasonable risk. So when I want to think about tolerable risk, and I would, I guess one of my takeaways, by the way, I have to remember what Rich's instructions were, and that is that hazard does not equal risk. That's one takeaway. But when I think about tolerable risk, I like to put it into this format. So first is, I don't know that I can actually use a pointer. I don't know if I can. Is that working? No, it's not. Okay. So first is, there's the severity. And we can start with fatalities and work our way all the way down to complaints, okay? If we start from the top and work our way down, right? And then there's the likelihood of occurrence. And what I tried to do was put this in the format of 1 in 100 million. That goes back to the one fatality in 100 million from the exploding airplane engine, to 1 in 10 million, 1 in a million, and then it'll go all the way down to 1 in 10,000, okay? So, and then what I did is I just used my arbitrary sense of what is tolerable from 35 years of studying this, right? So my arbitrary sense of what I think is tolerable, what society tolerates. And then I did something else. Whoops, gotta go back, went too far. I took a product that is in 98% of 130 million households in the United States. And I went through the available data on fatalities, hospitalizations, and treated and released injuries, and on property damage for the years 2012 to the years 2016 in the United States. And that's where that category of product stands. And it's interesting because unlike blinds, cords, or other products, no one is saying the standards for this product is particular. I'm not going to tell you what the product is, but no one's saying the standard for this product needs to change. Everybody seems to be quite acceptable that this is a reasonable standard for this particular product. And it's in some 120 plus million homes and used mostly daily, right? So then I took and looked at a product that has been recalled. And I plotted that data. It's the same category, okay? But that product was a voluntary, recall. And I sit back and I say, was that really necessary? Because that product is an order of magnitude safer from real data than the category that it sits in. So when I think about this, I think, how should we think about tolerable risk? And I'm asking the question, how should we be thinking about what's tolerable and what's not tolerable? And if this particular category is not tolerable, then let's change the standard, right? But if this particular category is tolerable, is an acceptable, and it's not an unreasonable level of risk, but it's acceptable, then let's not beat up on products, right, that are less hazardous, less risky. So those are my final thoughts, and that's where I'd like to leave you. And thank you very much.
Thank you, Gene. I did take some notes, and I have the list of the items that seem to be the ones that the panelists would like the government representatives in the room to pay attention to, among others, but these are the ones that you called out. We get a double star next to the first one, and that is work together, the three agencies work together with standards development organizations, all three governments. That was mentioned several times. Another one was that, I have to read my writing. Okay. Another one was that through the use of transparency and science, we can move efficiency forward. Another one was that there may be value in developing an innovative product process standard. And although you weren't explicit, either Belinda or Jean, I think you were implying that the technical staffs from the agencies could be active in that work.
That's correct.
Okay.
We could send an engraved invitation if that would be helpful.
I wouldn't want to comment on whether that would be helpful. As I said, it's a free country. So, yeah, go ahead and follow through as you see fit. And it's always about the science. That was another one. And I think that came up a couple of times. And then finally, hazard does not equal risk. And we just saw a graphic illustration on that particular point. We got done. Actually, we're early. Believe it or not, on this panel, we are going to have more than just time for just one or two quick questions. We have, by my watch, we have 14 minutes. So we have time for a little bit of chat, a little discussion. So is there anyone out there who would like to either make a comment to this panel or ask a question or prompt a response from our panelists? We have microphones. If you hold up your hand, someone will bring you a mic.
I just have a question about the this team you want to put together, ICFSO. Is this going to be open to anybody who wants to participate, testing agencies? And is this at the meeting, or is this something outside the meeting?
So it is public information. If you go to www.icfaso.org, select the Northwest Regional Meeting, click on Schedule, and look at Monday afternoon at 4 o'clock. I will expect to see you there. It is absolutely public. Everyone is welcome.
Comment or question? I get it. We all get it. Okay, last chance.
I think happy hour started already.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Friday,
Well,
Rich.
I really want to thank the panelists for being here. Did you have were you trying to make a comment? Oh, okay. Indeed it is. Okay, well, I want to say thank you very much. I know we're still going to hear from the chairman, but I wanted to just mention that as the head of the office responsible for putting this together, that I am incredibly proud of the people who work in my office. It's not just one person that put time into this. It's a team effort. And it's not just our team either. It was constant work by teams in Ottawa. Well, actually, not just Ottawa. In several places in Canada, actually, because they're not all together in one city. But teams in Mexico and in Canada who work together with our team to make it happen. And if I didn't say it before, I'll say it again. I really, really am proud of the work that they did. It's just amazing. So that's all for our panel. And Brittany, are you going to jump in now? Thank you.
So as we prepare to wrap up for today, we're going to have one last set of closing remarks. So if our three principals would like to take the dais. We'll have closing remarks from Acting Chairman Ann Marie Buerkle, Federal Attorney Beardo, as well as Robert Iannero as our final wrap-up and closing remarks.
I'm not sure where to begin. What an impressive day that was put together here. So many people to thank, but I will start by thanking all of those who agreed to participate in the various panels. As I said this morning, your engagement and your willingness to share your expertise and your insights really is a key to our success in moving along the concept of product safety. Since I've been at the agency for 5 years, I talk about collaboration every time I open my mouth. If you've heard me, you're probably tired of hearing it. But I firmly believe that we can accomplish safety in a way when we're all at the table and we're all sharing our safety and our expertise. And as Rich said, we, the government, don't have all the answers. We just don't. We don't have the resources. We don't have any of what we need to get to have all the answers. And so that's why your input and your expertise with all of us is so key to our success. And I sincerely thank all of those who took the time to travel here and to spend their day here to understand product safety and to hear from our three countries. As I said earlier today, we're building on solid accomplishments. The joint statement that will be published right after we conclude the summit will be an accurate reflection of our accomplishments as well as the ambitious work we intend to undertake in setting forth for our three agencies. I truly believe that all consumers, and we are all consumers, I thought that was such a great way to start the presentation. We are all consumers, and if we think about it that way, I think that's breaking down some of the silos, and rather than yelling back and forth at each other, we're really trying to solve the problem. But I believe that all consumers and stakeholders are better served by the product safety cooperation among our three governments. I would be remiss, and I will say it again, just about the excellent panel discussions we've had here today. And again, I want to thank all of the participants for being here. Finally, as I said this morning, these events just don't happen. They take a tremendous amount of work and commitment by all three of our staffs. This morning we recognized all three of the staffs. But this afternoon, I want to, in particular, thank Tilvin Burnell. Where is she? Tilvin has worked tirelessly for so many weeks to put these last 2 days together, and her work has not gone unnoticed, and certainly the success of these 2 days and our summit is reflective of all of the work she has done. As I joked with her yesterday, I said, you probably put less time into planning your wedding. And these events are a tremendous amount of work, and she deserves such a tremendous amount of credit. And as Rich said earlier, the international group in our agency is small, and so when one undertakes a project, everyone undertakes a project. And so you saw the entire team here over the past 2 days helping to make today and yesterday work so well, and I appreciate what they have done so very much. Again, so I will, I think at this point, turn it over to Robert.
Thank you, and good afternoon again, everyone, and thank you again for being here and spending today with us. Truly impressed with such a constructive and informative summit. First off, I know folks are probably getting a bit tired of hearing all the thanks, but on behalf of Health Canada, I did want to express our sincere gratitude to you, Anne Marie, and your staff, your amazing team, for being such great hosts and putting on such an impressive event. You have not only been a gracious host, but you've been so generous in welcoming us not only as colleagues, but as true friends, and I have no doubt that I speak for my colleagues at Profeco as well. So it's truly been an impressive day. The presentations were quite informative, and I think it did give us an opportunity to share and to showcase some of the great work that we've been doing trilaterally through the summits, and I'll speak to that in just a few moments. No doubt the presentations on e-commerce were very informative, as well as the panel this afternoon on high energy, high lithium-ion batteries. Particularly enjoyed the last panel on stakeholders and obviously how what an important role they play and how we can continue to improve our work as regulators and collaborating and coordinating our efforts with our broad range of stakeholders. I left the Consumer Product Safety Bureau in 2011, and I had spent a good number of years in the area of consumer product safety before leaving in 2011. And I can tell you that the amount of cross-jurisdictional cooperation and collaboration that has taken place since I've left is honestly outstanding. It's astonishing. When I was in consumer product safety, I think the international office here at the CPSc was made up of one individual by the name of Colin Church. Some of you who have been around for a while may even remember him. So I think obviously a lot has changed since then, and that is obviously led to the significant achievements that we've seen starting from our first summit in 2011 and as we sit here and conclude our fourth. I think what that does show and demonstrate is the commitment that each of our jurisdictions is placing on the importance of collaboration and coordination across our three regulatory organizations. I think it's really important to note that trilateral cooperation across our regulatory agencies does not only benefit industry, consumers, and broad stakeholders, but it benefits our roles as regulators, and simply put, it's good for us too. Without that collaboration and coordination, and we've heard countless times today, the rate of introduction of products from conception to market entry, and to the fact that e-commerce is driving so many sales in the world today, and believe it or not, we as three regulators do have limited resources, that our interjurisdictional cooperation and collaboration is key for us to be successful. And in fact, it's my belief from Health Canada that we would not be as successful as we have been in achieving the important responsibilities and mandate of protecting the health and safety of our citizens in our respective jurisdictions if we did not have that level of cooperation and collaboration. So one key takeaway for me, and there's many, and I don't want to repeat many of the things that has already been said, but one of the areas that I do feel is an area that we can focus in going forward is in areas where we may not have any requirements, or we maybe haven't identified hazards or risks, and I agree there's a difference. I think there's an opportunity for the three jurisdictions to come together at very early stages, at initial stages, from the ground up, to work together, to compare knowledge, to compare data, to compare expertise, and to the greatest extent possible work together at the earliest stages. Whether or not that includes the innovative product process standard, I think that may fall into that type of category. At Health Canada and under the Canada Consumer Product Safety Act, we have 34 regulations that from time to time need to get updated and need to get modernized based on latest standards, latest test methodology, changes in incident data, whatever the case may be. And when we review those requirements, I think it goes without saying that we look at other jurisdictions and update and modernize those regulations to try to align them as much as possible. And that is in fact what we've done, and I can just give you three quick examples that are quite recent. First of all, lead in children's jewelry. and then soon to be final publication in our Canada Gazette Part 2 are playpens and small magnets and toys. So I think we've got some very recent examples, and I hope our stakeholders here today realize that we hear you loud and clear, that whenever possible we align our requirements. Aligning those requirements, though, I would say is not the only area that we can collaborate and coordinate. We have many programmatic elements that we've talked about, be it recall or trying to coordinate better on, say, the fast-track recall process or on import. There are many programmatic elements beyond just our regulatory frameworks. I would be remiss if I didn't just take a moment to note, though, that from time to time, this is my big caveat, there's going to be differences. And those differences could exist for a variety of reasons. It could come from the fact that we have come to conclusions in our risk assessment that have made different conclusions, or we may conclude that the best approach to manage risks in those products may be different than some of our colleagues. But I think it's fair to say that those should not be the norm, and ideally would be limited to the greatest extent possible. And I think to date we've demonstrated that. So with that, Anne Marie and Rogelio, you and your staff have brought, no doubt, positive energy, enthusiasm to all of your work, and that has been reflected, I think, in the discussions that we've had, not only today, but as we spent time yesterday together. It's been a truly productive and constructive summit, and I know that our teams have a lot of work to do going ahead, and we look forward to continuing to build on the momentum to date. And just to conclude, I'd like to say that Health Canada is very much looking forward to hosting the next North American Consumer Product Safety Summit in Ottawa, Ontario. So stay tuned for those details, and we'll be excited to report on the progress that we will have made in the next 3 years. So thank you again. Merci. Gracias.
Thank you very much, Robert. Rogelio?
Buenas tardes. Al cierre de esta cuarta cumbre sobre seguridad de productos de consumo, es necesario y estamos todos obligados a expresar nuestro reconocimiento, nuestro agradecimiento a Mary Ann y a su equipo por las atenciones, la hospitalidad, la anfitrionía que nos han dado estos 2 días. Gracias, Sam, por tu apoyo y por el entusiasmo con el que has armado y organizado esta importantísima reunión para nosotros. También debo reconocer la participación comprometida, decidida de Health Canada para que esta reunión tuviera brillo y posturas muy serias, con aportaciones muy concretas. Robert, mi reconocimiento a todo tu equipo por su presencia hoy en esta cuarta reunión. Qué feo discurso me hiciste, hija, no me gustó. En fin, a ver, yo quiero improvisar un poco. En la historia de la humanidad, dicen los expertos, el siglo XX fue el siglo de las grandes aportaciones y avances científicos en todos los órdenes del quehacer humano. Pero les tengo una buena y una mala noticia. Es ya una sentencia emitida por científicos muy calificados que el 21 lo va a rebasar, y por mucho, al 20. Los desarrollos tecnológicos y con ellos la interacción que con las nuevas formas de comunicación que tenemos va a generar crecimientos exponenciales, y qué bueno para la humanidad. Pero también tenemos que entender que este desarrollo pues traerá productos en los mercados que nos toca vigilar, que seguramente no van a ser todo lo transitable, lo permisible que nuestras leyes autoricen en su momento. Hace un momento se hablaba de los riesgos y los peligros de cada producto, y cada nación tiene derecho a marcar sus propios parámetros. Hay una lógica más o menos común, pero los rigores pueden variar con algunos matices. Hoy más que nunca, este tipo de encuentros se explican y se justifican. Cada dólar que se gastó el día de ayer y el día de hoy para la realización de este evento está más que justificado. Las aportaciones que haga Canadá en el 21 también lo van a estar. Por esto que denuncio, todos los días surgen productos nuevos que invaden los mercados regionales, hemisféricos e internacionales. Luego entonces, los trabajos que tenemos que realizar como agencias deben de ser más intensos. ¿Tendremos más recursos para la ejecución de nuestras tareas? Sí. ¿Tendremos que ser más rigurosos en términos de asertividad? Sí. ¿Tendremos que hacerlo con auxilio de la academia y aplicando la ciencia con rigor? Sí. Tenemos que seguir colaborando entre nosotros para que nuestros consumidores y nuestros proveedores tengan plena certeza de que nuestras agencias continuarán realizando ejercicios de verificación, inspección, análisis, etcétera, y que estaremos compartiendo recíprocamente lo que cada cual de ellas vaya encontrando. Entre los consumidores de nuestras naciones debe existir la seguridad, la sensación, la certeza de que cualquier producto que no cumpla con los estándares requeridos en cualquiera de los 3 países miembros que participamos en esta cumbre, pues seguramente no van a circular en ninguno de los otros 2. Ann y Robert, tengan la certeza de que todo producto que sea retirado del mercado en este país o en Canadá no podrá comercializarse en México. Tengan esa certeza. Gracias por su apoyo. Esta colaboración conjunta de la que hoy estamos dando un testimonio, la inscribo como parte del programa del gobierno del presidente Peña, que en su inicio llamó Programa Nacional para la Protección y Defensa de los Derechos de los Consumidores 2013-2018. Los trabajos de esta cumbre y las 3 previas no tienen precedentes en la historia de la relación de nuestras 3 naciones. Es algo que no se hacía, o si se hacía era bastante informal. Y para mí es un enorme orgullo decir que son parte, estos trabajos, de lo que acabo de referir como parte del plan de defensa de los derechos de los consumidores del presidente Peña. Vamos a esperar con ansiedad y con entusiasmo que llegue 2021. En medio de eso, tengan la certeza de que vamos a trabajar día con día en la inacabable tarea de estar revisando los productos que se están comercializando en nuestros mercados locales. De esta suerte, tengo que decir que están concluyendo los trabajos de esta 4ª cumbre de seguridad en productos de consumo en América del Norte, pero sin embargo, pienso que no concluyen este día las tareas que tendremos que estar realizando para continuar honrando el compromiso que no permite ni descansos, ni bajar los brazos, que consiste en garantizar la presencia en nuestros mercados solamente de productos que no resulten perniciosos para la salud y la seguridad de los consumidores. Hago votos para que este tipo de reuniones se multipliquen a lo largo del hemisferio y enhorabuena por Canadá, por Estados Unidos y por México. Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much, and let me just finally thank both of my colleagues and their staffs for making the trip here to the United States, to Bethesda, Maryland, to engage with us for this trilateral summit. Not only have we had just an excellent 2 days with a lot learned and a lot of tasks laid out before us, but I think we have forged some friendships and relationships that I am confident that we will continue the conversations and the relationships only to strengthen product safety throughout our continent. At this time, I just would wish both of my colleagues safe travels and all of their staff safe travels. This has been a wonderful 2 days. Congratulations to all of the organizers, and thank you for your service. This ends and concludes our summit. Brittany, I think I turn it over to you.
Yes, thank you. And quickly, just a few closing remarks. We're gonna, if we would ask for the three principals to stay here, they're gonna have some photographs before we leave today. So thanks to everyone for coming. Just one last piece that I wanted to make sure everybody was aware of. There were a few questions regarding the slides. The CPSc slides that you saw today will be available later, I guess probably next week, on the CPSc website. So if anybody was interested in getting a copy of the slides presentations from the CPSc staff today, please check the website. And then there was another question regarding the entire summit today that has been taped, and it will also be available next week on our YouTube channel. So you can find that on youtube.com/CPSc. So with that, I'd like to thank everybody for being here today. Thank you for your attention, and I wish everyone safe travels and have a wonderful weekend. And I would like to note that we're finished before 5 for the people who were concerned about happy hour. So thank you.